This event today would have not been possible without the power of our long-standing partnership with Salesforce, so I have a special thanks to Alina Light and the Sales Performance Management team with partnering together and pulling this panel. On the agenda today, I'm going to recap why we're here. I'll introduce you to my panelists. We'll spend 30 minutes chatting about what's going on in the state of retail today, and then we save some time at the end for Q&A, and we'll have some breakout sessions at the end. So let's get into it. I came across a paper that my dad wrote 30 years ago. He's a vice president of sales and a venture capitalist, and it was transferable to this panel. It was the characteristics of a successful business. It was a straightforward statement of mission and values, like a V2 mom that we do here with Salesforce. In fact, effective internal and external communications. Welcome to the Vonage Hub. The ability to attract and retain superior people, employing and adapting the newest and best technologies, a written business plan, daily, monthly, and annual goals, a commitment to meet them, a system that it's measured, and then the steps to the plan and how you're going to execute. But let me take a couple steps back. We're going to really talk about employing and adapting the newest and best technologies. Technologies utilized together like Vonage Communications Platform, Salesforce CRM, and Sales Planning are the trifecta of reaching agility in sales and setting your teams up for success in planning, pivoting, and day-to-day execution. Today with me, I have on stage managing partner at Rosetree Solutions, David Rosenbaum. Along with his brother, Craig, they founded Rosetree 10 years ago. They've grown an elite team of senior Salesforce consultants and architects working across the vast suite of Salesforce products. Rosetree is a Summit tier partner, and they have a specific expertise in retail, technology, and manufacturing verticals. They've been one of my personal and highest recommended partners in the Salesforce ecosystem. Matt Marcotte, SVP of Global Industry Advisors at Salesforce. Matt brings 30 years of experience in consumer retail. He previously was COO of Bergdorf Goodman, head of Global DTC at Tory Burch, and head of retail for North America and Europe at Apple. Matt approaches business as a consumer anthropologist and is obsessed with human behavior, relationships, and experience. Dave Borelli, SVP of Sales Performance Management at Salesforce. Dave has 15 years at Salesforce. He built the commercial business for Salesforce Canada, and now he's focused on scaling the Sales Performance Management team globally. Dave Borelli, I'm going to kick off this first question to you. Talk to us about why we're here and how sales planning came about at Salesforce.
Yeah, and Lauren, thanks for pulling my picture from when I first started at Salesforce. Makes me think about how old I've gotten since I've been here. Good morning, everybody. So, yeah, it's an exciting time for us on the SPM team at Salesforce. I mean, for those who have been around the ecosystem for a while, Salesforce Sales Cloud is sort of our original cloud. It's what Salesforce was built on. And we've kind of owned that space for a very long time. And I remember even going back 10, 15 years, a lot of the feedback from customers is, listen, we run our entire sales team on Salesforce, and yet you don't give us the ability to plan our business on platform or bookend it with things like incentive comp management. And about 5 years ago, we released a tool called Territory Planning. It became one of the fastest growing tools in our portfolio, and that kind of validated the idea that customers really need this and they want this. And so more recently, we've made a declaration that we are going to be the number one tool in the sales performance management space. And so as of July 18th, we released Sales Planning, and it's really been a successful launch for us. And I think, converging with that is the idea that every single company in the world, especially in retail and consumer goods, is under so much pressure to do more with less. These tools help that cause even more. So we're super excited about it.
Thank you. Matt, we're excited to have you here. Can you give us an outlook on the trends in retail that we expect to see in the next 18 to 24 months?
Sure. We were talking about this earlier. Having been in retail for 30 years, the trends don't change all that much. We just repackage them based on what the external kind of environment is like. And Dave actually touched on something that is probably the biggest challenge right now for retailers, which is doing more with less. We're seeing a lot of people, whether it's because of the human capital challenges, that there just aren't as many employees that as there used to be, they've exited the retail environment, whether it's the fact that overhead such as payroll, which is the largest, I would say, variable cost for retailers, where they try and cut that cost to try and get more margin. We're seeing a lot of companies try and figure out ways to automate, right? So you see it a lot with chatbots in service and ways to actually kind of build process efficiencies. I think in the past, retailers have been very much, if you can't sell it, you don't invest in it. And now we're seeing retailers realize that they have got to get the plumbing right to be able to leverage some of their human capital to be deployed in other places. That's number one. Number two, we're definitely seeing this balance now between top line growth and bottom line profitability. If you remember during the pandemic, all companies, but especially in retail, just chased top line growth, right? That's how they stayed in business because of all the things that were happening with people not going to stores and all that different stuff and supply chain issues. Now, coming out of the pandemic, everyone pivoted to it's all about margin and profitability at the cost of top line growth. What we're now seeing is people, and this happens, by the way, this is a cyclical thing. We're now seeing retailers realize they have to balance both of those things, right? Which makes sense, but obviously, there's this I had this old boss that once said to me, no one's ever operated themselves to greatness, but you have to have operational greatness to actually be able to drive sales, right? So people are realizing that. The third thing I would say, which I think is really important, we're hearing a lot about this idea of personalization. Well, actually, we're hearing a lot about hyper-personalization. Let's just start with personalization, right? Personalization at scale. And I think this is where retailers get really enamored with the bright, shiny objects versus saying, okay, where are you starting from? And how do you actually start to just figure out how to personalize by segment, right? And this idea of loyalty is another big trend that you're probably hearing a lot about. And what's interesting is loyalty to me has always been the word people have used, but what loyalty has meant is more points and promotions and discounts. But what people are realizing now is that in order to actually get people to choose you, you have to create some version of emotional connection with them and be valuable to them in their lives, right? And so what we're seeing a lot of retailers start to explore is what does emotional loyalty look like? How do you get people to attach themselves to you because they see you add value to their existence? And that's commodity all the way up to, and you're seeing one segment in retail has done really, really well throughout this kind of inflationary time is luxury, because luxury has nothing to do with need. Luxury has everything to do with want. Right? And so I think everyone's starting to try to figure out ways to actually cut through by creating value and want with their customers in all different categories. So we could go on all day, but I'll stop there for some of those.
I love that. Thank you. David Rosenbaum, what's your take on the trends that Matt mentioned in correlation to what you're seeing inside of the projects you're working on with your customers?
Yeah, quite a few interesting pieces that Matt touched on there. So, one, I like the emotional loyalty comment there, and I think that's really where, and we've had multiple conversations with customers just this week around where does NPS and loyalty intersect, and driving such a great customer experience as part of that. And so this is where things start to get interesting because it takes more than just the data around how many points do you have as a loyalty member. And so bringing in that information from multiple sources, you can probably see where we're going. You've probably heard a little bit about a little thing called Data Cloud, which drives some of that as well. But the point here is more that it takes multiple pieces of the puzzle to do that. And then back to Dave's point around, customers are demanding and looking for opportunities to consolidate some of the sales planning products that are out there, and bringing that data closer to a single platform is really what's going to unlock and allow them to move a lot faster with the agility that Lauren mentioned.
So let's dive in a little bit deeper on loyalty and agility. David from Roastery, I'm going to pass this back to you again. How does sales planning help with loyalty and agility?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking earlier as a group here. One of the things that I think is really interesting is you have to constantly. One of the only constants is change, right? And this type of environment, and Matt touched on that as well. Is that retailers the trends stay the same, but it's these external variables that we have to account for as part of this. And so when we talk about how you look at from a territory planning standpoint, from the coverage to make sure that you have a optimal customer experience and the right amount of coverage in the right areas at the right time, but then how does that evolve over time is really critical to having the right tools to be able to support that.
Yeah, I would add to that too, and like to your point about the optimal coverage, right? It sounds basic, but you'd be shocked at how many companies, not only in this space but across industries, don't pay attention to that coverage model. And so if you think about it in very basic terms, if you've got a couple of territories, one of them is overloaded with tier 1 accounts, those accounts that we know are cash cows, that we know have a tremendous amount of potential, and another territory is very underloaded and very thin and sparse, you're going to have one rep who really just pays attention to the same old accounts, and they're going to let some of those other tier 1s and 2s go by untouched. Those accounts aren't going to have necessarily the greatest experience, and therefore that doesn't really drive the amount of loyalty that you want ultimately. And on the flip side, the rep that has a sparse territory is probably not going to be operating with efficiency, optimizer, probably a little disgruntled, and that also sort of cascades down to how they interact with your customers. So while, as was mentioned before, a lot of times we talk about loyalty and we think about points and repeat purchasing, sometimes it starts with the science of building a really solid sales foundation, and that's sort of how we think about it.
Great. Matt, can you give us the perspective on why retail and agility and being able to pivot plans multiple times a year matters for retailers versus one, or what do the statistics look like when you can plan multiple times a year versus only doing once a year?
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. We talked a little about this earlier, and I think this has potentially some nuances, whether you're a direct-to-consumer, B2B or B2C, right? Depending on, because for a reason I won't get into right now. But I will say one of the things that we have seen is that during the pandemic, and I know this feels like forever ago that we're talking about the pandemic, but it changed so many behaviors for people. We saw 75% of consumers change brands during the last 2 years. And what's actually even more interesting than that is that 90% of those consumers say they're going to continue that behavior. So loyalty in the old world is gone. That doesn't exist anymore because people are looking for, and this is actually the drivers of change. And this is really why when you think about sales planning and really being able to show up in the right place, like Dave was saying, whether it's the accounts that you have or the attention you're paying to them or however you divvy that up, the 3 big reasons why people are changing is availability of product, convenience of getting it, and then price, which is value. So it's not necessarily the lowest price, but what the best value is to them. And so I think those things have continued to change. So the ability for retailers to be able to be more dynamic in understanding what people need, where they need it, when they need it, and how they need it is super important. Add to that 73% of consumers expect brands and retailers to understand their unique needs, wants, and desires. 66% of them expect brands to show empathy. So we're starting to see this human trait being attributed to brands. So they want brands to know them. They want brands to serve them. They want brands to be where they want them to be, right? So you've got all of these factors which require brands to be more dynamic, to be able to pivot, to be able to actually look at things not on an annualized basis, but actually on maybe a quarterly, monthly basis, whatever the business model you have is. And what we do know is that brands that actually have a robust retail data strategy are growing sales 2.9 times more than their competitors. So it does absolutely benefit you to be kind of always in there looking without actually being psychotic about making changes that you can't actually execute on.
Harnessing the power of data.
Yes.
Dave Borelli, do you have any customer stories you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind just listening to this is, one of the largest hardware retailers in the world. They had sort of an issue where they were doing their planning in their territories in spreadsheets and a lot of different siloed solutions, as many of us have done. And part of the challenge was that throughout the year, there might be certain stores that were underperforming and that were littered with CSATs, and there was really no way for them to pivot in year and make sure that they sort of change the coverage model to counter those trends. And what ends up happening is you're having to wait till the end of the year where you do this one-time planning exercise, and by that time, some of those challenges spiral out of control. And so I think by leveraging our planning tools, it allowed them to really be agile, as we've been talking about, and really respond to those forces in real time.
Thank you. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, especially when we talk about retail, retailers aren't sitting still, just like most of our customers, and so you're opening new locations, you're decommissioning stores, you're refreshing those stores, and so those types of variables are absolutely going to play into account of what type of coverage should we have from a B2B or B2B2C coverage standpoint, and leveraging the data externally to pull that in is really a game changer here.
Yeah, and this just to add to that, which I think one of the trends that I didn't actually talk about, which speaks to this directly, is that there has been a reinvestment in physical locations. So you're starting to see retailers reopen stores, add to their fleet. So all the things that David and I were talking about, which is the idea of understanding how to balance all the different factors that go into having the right inventory, the right staffing, the right relationships in the different geographies, is becoming more complex because, as we said, doing more with less, we're seeing people reduce inventories, which means they don't have flush inventories to be putting everywhere. They've got to be very surgical about what goes where and when. So just want to add that we're seeing the physical store locations now start to tick up again.
Thank you. So AI is the hot topic this year at Dreamforce. Dave Borelli, I'm going to kick it back to you. How does sales planning help get you ready for AI?
Yeah, again, I think it gets back to what I talked about. Even as we think about loyalty, it starts with the foundation of sales. And I think when we start to think about how are we going to bring AI into our business, how are we going to take advantage of it? Again, I think it starts with setting yourself up with the right foundation. And the way we think about it is, in order to make AI work for you, you need to have the right level of engagement with your customers, and you have to have the right amount of data in your system for the AI to actually learn and provide value to you. And so, again, it gets back to, we need to make sure we've got the right people at the right time with the right customers in the right segment, and that way we'll be able to engage with them as we want and bring all that data into our CRM and take advantage of AI from there.
David Rosenbaum, anything you want to add to that around getting ready for AI?
Yeah, and kind of stealing a page out of Matt's book, the conversations around AI themselves might be new, but the underlying aspects that are required to power that are not new. So things like data quality, data governance, proper integration strategy, et cetera, are all very much going to be required to support a proper AI strategy that is inevitably going to be an ongoing change for all of our customers.
I think it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not in the conversations you've had with customers, but we were out in Connections in Chicago a few months ago, and AI was obviously becoming a bigger conversation, not as big as it is right now, but it was definitely gaining the kind of the momentum. And what was interesting is these conversations had the same feel to me that the conversations in the pandemic had. So to me, pandemic was a forcing function for people to invest in digital technology because they had to for survival. And I feel this whole AI conversation is a forcing function for people to actually look at the plumbing they have to say, I can't even leverage the incredible benefits of generative AI because I don't have a data strategy. So I think just to kind of emphasize what Dave and Dave are saying, it is interesting. I think people's brains and minds are open in different ways to actually re-looking at the underlying and underpinning system. So we just need to make sure we take advantage of that while there's an opening for people to really think about it.
We've moved through this panel so quickly today. I'm actually moving into our key takeaways. Matt, what are some key takeaways that you'd like to leave with the group to stay top of mind?
I think it's probably just a little bit of what I just said. I think the challenges are not different. The environment is different, and there's a crawl, walk, run strategy that retailers need to have you hold their hands through. Well, they may get enamored by the bright, shiny object of AI, if we're using that. They will then become paralyzed because they don't know how to get there. And so I think our job is to break down from the big to the small and help take them through the steps as that partner, because they honestly don't know how to get there. And so I think that would be a huge benefit. They want to get there, but I think they need the partnership and how to do it in a very kind of nugget-based because of many things. And that would be my takeaway.
Thank you. David Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize that as you got to get back to basics. And that's, as Matt mentioned, proper data strategy. It's all of the unsexy things that have been discussed for years and years and years that people like to kind of sweep under the rug, but then chase that bright, shiny object. So getting back to those basics, from a sales performance management perspective, empowering the field to make the best decisions that they can, and leveraging the data that is typically or historically tied up in all of these legacy systems and bringing that to the field. But that starts with having proper coverage. It starts with, again, back to the basics from a pure sales planning perspective.
Yeah, and what I'd say is, the takeaway I'd have for everybody is to sort of reset your mindset around sales planning or your beginning of year planning from a checkbox exercise where you're just hoping to God this thing gets done and you can't wait until you can just pump quotas out and get a spreadsheet out with your territories so that you can move on to more important things. It really needs to be viewed as like the first moment that you're setting yourself up for success in the coming year, and it should be an iterative process. So that would be my takeaway.
Is there anything I didn't ask any of you that you'd like to share with the group? An unscripted question. Awesome. So we're going to move into Q&A. So I'm going to ask my audio video team in the back if you could populate the QR codes for us on the presentation. And I have Alina Light in the back. If you want to go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to be doing breakout sessions, so if you want to learn more about sales management, sales performance management, you can meet with Alina. I'll be up here on stage with Vonage, and then you can also meet with David Rosenbaum, or if Matt and Dave have time afterwards. But we're going to open it up to Q&A. Any questions from the audience that you'd like to ask while we still have these three on stage? And you don't all have to start at once.
All right. Well, I heard you say that we're moving back into brick and mortar, which is great. But obviously, the logistics, delivery has been so important in the retail space. And I think about Pottery Barn, and they have a great tie-in with Ryder, who does their delivery. If it's not a great experience all the way through, as a consumer, I don't care who fell down, right? I want the best experience. So talk to me about when you're looking at data and you're using that and you're kind of having your retail data, but you also have perhaps an outside company that's handling the transportation and logistics. How do we manage the full experience from start to end for that client? And what are some of the steps that you're taking?
I'm not the tech guy in this conversation, but I will say this has been one of the biggest conversations we will have with companies. Is this, and listen, not to get completely Salesforcey on this, but this is why the Customer 360 is so important, and more importantly, connected systems. This is the number one issue that we see with companies, which is the systems either don't talk to each other, outside partners don't have, kind of connectivity into the inside data. We're not utilizing data the right way. And so I would say this goes back to having a data strategy around more logistics and the operational parts of your business. We have some great partners that actually tie very well into obviously what we do at Salesforce. If we're talking about things like delivery, like Bring, which is a great partner. But I would say this is why we're seeing challenges with this. As you said, I don't care where it fell down. If something happened, it means that I feel that way about the brand. This is the plumbing we were talking about, that people have to get that right before they move on to other things. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer, but it is a conversation we're constantly having about making sure there's a connectivity between all the different systems and offerings that you have, so you can have information flow through to a single source of truth. Dave's putting his up, so he's going to give me some backup.
Yeah. I think there are two threads that I would answer on that one. One is it's even more important where I see retail partners partnering with others, whether that's logistics or otherwise, that are looking for other digitally native partners to partner with, and that's being a key differentiator. We have a customer right now that's going between different POS systems and looking at hardware vendors, and a key differentiator is the ones that have fallen down on the ability to show the information that they need to run the business operationally. What are the types of issues that they're having? And so I see also more retailers that are looking at for more root cause analysis information. And so if they don't have that from their vendors, they're going to be shopping elsewhere, and that's from a B2B relationship standpoint or partner relationship management standpoint. And then the other thread that I wanted to pull on is pretty pure play customer experience. And the example you gave hits close to home because I was telling this story at dinner last night. A wonderful retailer that delivered some furniture to my home, and the delivery guy backed into a window and broke through the window. But the ability for myself to communicate with that brand, even though it was the third-party delivery company, for them to be on top of that and have that window fixed the next day, that's what completed the circle for me. So they didn't make me jump through a bunch of hoops. I had a single way to be able to get in touch with them at the channel that I wanted to communicate with that brand for. And so going back to from a pure customer service perspective, and we talked about bots and self-service and everything like that as well, those are the pieces that come together to support those kinds of issues.
Thank you. We have another question back here.
Okay. Hi, thank you. My name is Jen Kleinfeld, and I work at The Real Rail. I'm a Senior Salesforce Business Analyst, and I just love Salesforce, and I love your team and your reports. A question that I have has been a problem I've been sort of trying to work through. We want our reps to have autonomy in the field and to have, and not just reps, but also people in our stores to have autonomy in decisions they make to meet the customers in their moment with that problem in that moment to overcome the objective. But a lot of times they're limited by what we give them. We say, well, this month, this is our promo, or this, we have promo on this, promo on that, or you can give them this percentage or that percentage. But how do you set up a system that's flexible, that meets our customers in that moment, but also gives autonomy and ability and guardrails around it so that the system works and supports it in a way where as a company we're winning and as a client they're winning also?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. You guys can. I mean, I think that's really important, right? So, I would say two things. One, I would even take that question back to the planning phase, where yes, you want to set up centralized systems, you want to template everything, but you also want to give the people that are in the field, on the street, and those front and second line leaders the ability to make tweaks to those plans to embed the nuance that they know of the business that someone in ops or someone in executive leadership just would never understand. And so I think having a proper platform when you're doing that type of planning that gives you that ability is extremely important. Fast forward to when they're actually in the field, I think it's the same sort of thing. I think you want to enable them with tools that allow them to make those tweaks on the fly, even though they might be satisfying the requirements that you've set out for them at a high level over the course of a month or whatever you need them to focus on. But in the course of their day, or when they start to see trends in the field, have you given them the tools to be able to pivot? And I think that's a really important piece of this.
And I would say even in an ideal state, allowing them to pivot in the moment is great, but we realize that that's not always practical or possible. Even, and we talked about crawl, walk, run earlier, a starting point is what's the ability for them to provide real-time feedback back to corporate to know how to adjust our strategy. And so is that pipeline open of that feedback and ability to absorb that information back from the field? One of the most rewarding things that we do on the consulting side is being able to sit with our customers, not just at the corporate side, but actually in the field, the people who are using the technology day to day. And hearing comments like that of, yeah, well, I wish this was different or that was different is incredibly valuable as it is to most of our customers.
So I'm just going to tell a little story that I think actually incorporates both of these comments. Having run organizations when you have field employees that have to, as you said, like I'm a big believer in commitment versus compliance. And compliance is a checklist. Commitment means I understand what I'm supposed to be doing. So the story I'm going to share with you is Four Seasons Hotel in Arizona. If you've ever been there, it's got these casitas all over the property. And when I was at Apple, we were actually studying kind of customer experience and philosophies and whatever, and we were having a conversation with the team from that hotel, and they were telling us about this particular man. He's a high-value client for Four Seasons, stays there a lot, executive traveler. He had stayed there for 4 nights, checked out, gets to the check-in. The woman behind the counter was like, "How was your stay?" He's like, "Actually, it was horrible." She's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, there were people partying for the last 2 nights outside my casita. I couldn't sleep, and I had meetings in the morning, and blah, 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 whatever." But she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. The stay is on us." So she gave him 4 days free, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And he left, and he was happy. But they had a system in place for what they refer to as after-action review. So she had to document this whole thing that happened. It goes into the system, and the executive team every morning meets and actually reviews all of these opportunities. And what they found was there was a wedding party that was right next to his casita. What they did was they actually changed the layout of the entire property. So they separated business travel from leisure. So they had a system in place and a process in place for actually making changes. And to Dave's point, they had a feedback mechanism. But what they did was they didn't punish the person for giving away, $6,000, whatever the nut was. They actually congratulated her and said, "Thank you so much for helping the customer. By the way, in the future, here are some other options," right? So there was a learning, but they actually made sure she felt like she did the right thing by protecting the customer. But most importantly, there were processes and systems and platforms in place, even though probably a little bit less technologically advanced than we are today, that actually allowed them to learn and to adjust and to not, when you have a planning once a year, they're real-time changing their business model to be relevant to their customers.
It's a great story.
Thanks, I just made it up.
Oh, thanks.
Never happened.
Any other questions from the audience? We have another one.
Good morning. Jeff Shear, Fox News. We're going through an implementation right now of Salesforce, an MVP solution, pretty vanilla. And what I've noticed at this particular Dreamforce is there's a lot of focus, obviously, on data, on AI. Some of the things we're looking forward to in the next year is taking that MVP solution, putting a lot more logic in place, a lot more loyalty programs, using that AI to help build those offers correctly. And my question for you three is, as you look at someone that comes in with a pretty vanilla MVP solution, is it normally difficult to make that next step to, hey, now we're going to add loyalty, now we're going to add that AI to make sure we're getting the right loyalty offers to the right people at the right time? And now with data, how we use that, we've got data probably like everyone that goes into an implementation. We have it everywhere. We're using many solutions, but trying to get that all into now Salesforce. How big of a lift is that? What do you see as opportunities, and also what would you see as risks going into a lower level, simple solution, making that next step?
Can I give a high level answer, and you could probably dig into the meat because you're probably more adverse on it. So what I would say at a high level is the mistake we see customers make when they're at your point is that you're getting into the implementation. Everybody's coming at you with a million requests of things they want to see and outcomes they want to see, and then there's this urge to give them everything they want, right? And what ends up happening is you start with the Frankenstein and it's a disaster, right? You almost want to hold back and just release tiny bits of goodness, so to speak, because it's better to leave them wanting more than to make them feel like they're overwhelmed and can't do their job on day one. So that's like my blanket statement, but you can probably add some meat to that.
Yeah, I mean, every best practice typically revolves around that crawl, walk, run. And, as we've talked about, the agility and business is going to change. Setting a proper foundation with the understanding that your requirements over time are going to change is really what's going to help provide that guiding principle of let's play that long game. Let's make sure this is set up in a way that we have this expectation that these pieces might come out and be modified, and we need to put them back in. Our sources for data, our external sources for data might change, and that's just a normal thing. And so taking that mindset is probably the biggest thing that I see customers be able to keep up with that.
If I just take this from the being in the business mindset of someone who is maybe the customer of a department that's actually implementing something, what has been very helpful in the past is seeing a roadmap, right? So exactly what Dave said, but everyone's going to come to you with all of their things and they want them now, whatever is. When people said, okay, we heard everything people want, and even if the roadmap is going to change because of the changes, seeing that roadmap of like 6 months out, 1 year out, 2 years out, like, oh, what I want is showing up there. I'm okay with this because I know it's going to get there. And that doesn't solve anything, but just as someone who is sitting there like, well, why can't we do this? Well, we're going to look at that in a year from now because we have this crawl, walk, run strategy. It definitely brings down the anxiety, I think, for the business.
Any other questions? All right. So we're going to move into our breakout sessions if you'd like to stay behind. We have Alina back here. We also have some T-shirts from our session, so make sure you check them out in the back. So if you want to learn more about sales planning, you'll meet at this long back table here. Come find me if you want to learn more about Vonage, and if you'd like to learn more about Rosetree, you can come right up here and meet David. I'm greatly appreciative of having all of you in our session today, and we have so many more events going on at Dreamforce. We have a happy hour here today at 4 o'clock if you want to come back, and we have puppies that are available for adoption and petting from 2 to 4 p.m. in that corner. Highly recommend. Thanks again for your time today. I'm Lauren Odlin. If there's anything that you need while you're here, come find me, and enjoy the rest of your Dreamforce.